I've never met an influencer that had an easy time monetizing their audience. It is always one of the hardest pieces of like being an influencer is like, how do you maximize the monetization of this thing that you've built? Because most of them are missing a really good product. And that is where there can be really beautiful collaborations with tech companies, where the benefit of really good tech companies is like, you make a product that actually is really profitable and can like make a lot of money.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. My name is Tom, your host, and today we have a big episode. So this is actually Fame's roughly 10th client, Kobe, who was like head of growth of the company called Rupa Health, built probably our most downloaded podcast to date. And Kobe was responsible for it, as well as leading Rupa Health's growth function from around 5 million in lab revenue to 75 million. We go into this in the episode. And the podcast was a big part of that specifically. And what I loved about this episode is their ability to integrate influencers into their content creation programs and then also monetize the content creation programs to produce a negative CAC. Epic, because something I think is very important in B2B right now. So please tune in if you want a podcast like this or like Rupa Health's podcast. It was called the Root Cause Medicine Podcast. Please go to fame.so and request a proposal. Let's jump into this episode with Kobe now. Kobe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Excited to be here.
So we're going to dig into a B2B growth strategy, and then we're going to see what you learned from that and what you're doing now in the B2C realm.
I'm excited to do this. It's been a hot minute.
Yeah, we actually met, I think it was 2021, so like 4 to 5 years ago, where Rupa Health, which is Kobe's ex-business, were I think maybe like client number 10 of Fame. And probably, I think, in terms of downloads, definitely one of our most, if not the most successful podcasts. And so we're going to dig into what you did and how you did that. So I think it's probably good for you to give context on what the Rupa business was and also the journey, because recently acquired, I understand. So let's do that. Then let's move to the podcast.
Okay, so for everyone listening, Rupa Health is a lab platform for doctors. We're a 3-sided marketplace. So our primary users is doctors who are ordering lab tests. We also service the consumer who takes the lab test. And then we also have the lab company who is the supply of this marketplace.
And the company was founded, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, right? And then your role was, were you always CMO or head of growth?
Yeah, so I also came on board Rupa when we were about 10 people. One of my best friends, his name is Ben, was one of our co-founders, and I just fell in love with the whole founding team. Yeah, I came on board when we were about 10 people. I was the very first growth go-to-market person. Ended up scaling us from about 5 million a year in lab sales to over 75 million a year in lab sales in about 3.5 years. Ended up building, I think, almost like a 50-person team in my department. So that spanned marketing, sales. We also built out a university with Rupa University. I led all of our laboratory BD efforts. And then my favorite piece of this tiny dominion was our media empire. So we had a top 10 medical podcast. Thank you, Fame. We also had a medical magazine where we had, I want to say, almost 50 to 60 like medical contributors, like writing articles for us. At our peak, I believe we're pushing out almost 200 articles a month. And we built up about 500,000 social media followers. So we had our hand in a lot of different pies.
And so first, an observation. What I saw while working with you, because initially you are our main contact, right? But quite soon after we started working together, I kind of got delegated to someone else in your team, which I think is a big learning, because how are you going to lead a team ultimately of 50 marketers without delegating things? Like you kicked off the project, got it rolling, and then you delegated to somebody else. So would you say that was something you were actively doing in order to scale the team?
So you know where that comes from? When I was 19, I was running like another company. My very first company I started was like an online hippie shop. And we like built up like 500,000 followers, and we're just like driving like Facebook traffic to like sell dropship goods basically. And I read the 4-Hour Workweek book. And I was like, this is excellent. I can do like 40 hours of work in like 4 hours. I think my fatal flaw was, instead of like kicking my feet up in a beach somewhere, I then just kept working 40 hours a week, but applied all those same concepts. It's just like, how can I like leverage myself and get scale? So I got very good at that early on, of like figuring out, cool, where is my zone of expertise and like superpowers? And then what are the things that I can like give to someone else? And even if they do it 80% as good as me, just like, what are the things that I can like move off my plate? So yeah, definitely hired people to do things that they were better than me, hopefully at doing them. And yeah, no way we would be able to accomplish as much as we did if I was the one that was like constantly doing all the things. I think also I have this tendency as a manager. I describe the way I build things as like layers of an onion, where I will get super into the details of whatever it is that I'm like building out. So maybe we'll start with Facebook ads and I'll be like very hyper focused on what's our creative and what's our strategy and our audiences. And then we'll like get it chugging and running. And then I'll just like completely hand it off to someone and then not even think about it. And then I'll like move into Google ads and then I'll move on to like influencers. And then I'll move on to like, hey, we should start our own podcast. I'm very hands-on when we're like setting something up, and then I'll hand it off and just forget about it for months. And people will be like, does Kobe hate me? Like, why isn't he talking to me? And it's like, because you're doing your job well. But yeah, I probably is crazy for the people that work for me, but that's definitely my management style.
That is learning number one. And typically that's taught to entrepreneurs, but actually it should be taught to anyone like building a function, especially a fast growing function in a business. Let's move on to what I think is going to be learning number two, which is your guys' view on how media should be profitable.
So we look at media as just an asset. I think that it's really cool because you can use it as a way to drive down your blended CAC. When your assets that are driving users for your core product are also able to make money, you can have literally negative CAC, which was like one of the beautiful things about a number of different things that we did at Rupa. And I take a lot of inspiration from like The Hustle and Beehive and just like all these like newsletter businesses and stuff. I think how HubSpot acquired The Hustle is really freaking cool. Is like they built out this like giant newsletter thing and then like it got sold for like millions of dollars. And yeah, there's definitely a piece of me that was like, we can just build a giant media org here. It costs so much money to deliver impressions in front of doctors that it was like, cool, that by itself can make lots of money. And then the core business on top of it makes even more. It just becomes a super, super powerful flywheel.
So by the end, you had the podcast, the university, and the social channels. Let's say in the final like a year or so of the business before you sold it, and if you're happy to share as well, were those three things, as far as you could tell, profitable in terms of ad dollars against the cost for production?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So first, the university, without like breaking any NDAs, but it's probably easy to like reverse engineer. They usually like millions of dollars a year profitably. It was like by itself could have been its like own VC backed startup. And then the podcast as well, like I said, is it costs a lot of money to get in front of doctors. The other thing is that basically what we sold in a lot of ways was promotion for the laboratory companies. So the podcast and media was just kind of like a natural extension on top of the value that we're delivering for one of our major user groups.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like they get extra exposure. You're delivering them the test, I believe, and then you can get them more exposure if they advertise through your media channels. So you guys are almost like a media business as well.
Exactly, because the labs would constantly come out with like new tests and then they want to get that in front of their audience, which is the doctors. So we would bring doctors on the podcast to come talk about the tests and then be able to like highlight all of that and do it in a way that's like not super pushy, but was able to just like nicely insert like, hey, this thing that you really care about for this like new mold test or hormone test, this new lab just came out with it. Here's how it can make you a better doctor. It was good content and it was really valuable for all parties.
Another thing I thought you guys do well is working with influencers to help create the content. For example, you had a number of hosts for the show and all of them these like super engaging doctors that also had audiences. And I think with the university, you probably also had like experts/influencers involved. So what are your thoughts there and how do you actually get these people bought in and involved?
So I'm going to take this from the top down. And I don't know if you know this, Tom, but this is why we started a podcast. So the story of growth at Rupa, like we started with like Facebook ads and then we like capped out our volume and then we moved on to like Google ads and we capped on our volume. And then one of the next things we did was we moved on to like influencers. So we started sponsoring Dr. Mark Hyman, who's one of the founders of functional medicine. And he has a very large podcast himself. And it was a ton of money. I was like, myself when we like first started it because I was like, if we don't get, I think I'm gonna get fired if like this doesn't return users for us because there's like a lot of money to sponsor each episode. Turns out it was like one of the best things we ever did. Drives tons and tons of users. Really, really good for like brand and credibility. Really hard to track, but just it was driving so many users we could like still ask them where you heard about us and we're able to like show ROI. And it got to the point where I believe we were sponsoring like almost every single episode, like 3x a week. I don't know what his like eCPMs are anymore, but it's like $500 per 1,000 like impressions. It was like a lot of money. And I was sitting to myself thinking like, dang, sure would be great if like Hyman was just part of the team. Like shout out to Function Health for like figuring out how to do that. Like that was probably the right move. Get him on board, give him like 20% of your company and like let him just go to town. I have found that it is really hard to hire doctors or hire influencers at that level. I think like even with Function Health, they don't have him there full time. So you go a step down. Not that as a step down, but you got to like kind of like grow your own influencers. If you don't have a founder on the team that is like, I'm the founder of this industry with like 10 million followers, you can kind of build it yourself. So that's where we like basically we're looking for people that were super, super smart from like a clinical point of view, were at the top of their field, wanted to be an influencer, but like weren't quite there at like the superstar level yet. That's not fair because some of the people we hire are literally superstars.
So are we talking like maybe they'd have like 10,000 followers on Instagram?
So when we started, we brought Dr. Carrie Jones on board and she had hundreds of thousands of followers, which is like, she's definitely a superstar. Like she is queen of hormones. She's not yet, I think she will be, but she's not yet at like the Dr. Mark Hyman level of like millions and millions of followers. So it was at this perfect level where like we could like barely talk her into like coming on board. It took a lot of convincing.
When you say on board, do we mean like full-time employee, freelance contract just to host a podcast?
Yeah, we brought her completely on board, employee, full-time in all the meetings and everything. I think it's one of the ways that people really mess up when they do influencer marketing is they try to do this like cash pay thing. And I've just always seen it work better if you can get them on the team. Just briefly tying this into what we're doing with my current company at Sunflower, we brought on Eric, who's our in-house influencer now. He's our VP of sobriety. He has like 2 million followers on like TikTok and Instagram. Way better than trying to like go and find a bunch of small influencers and paying them like $500 per post or whatever.
And quickly on that, a first shout out to Sunflower. We're going to get to that later in the episode. Will be linked below. What is the deal? Because obviously Eric and Carrie, when they came on, had spent maybe years building up their own audience. In that employment contract, do you have some kind of agreement on what they have to post? Like, will they just post, like advertise you to their existing personal audience?
Okay, there's two things. So no, this might be a tech culture thing, but it's the same thing as like tech employees. Like we expect you to be bought in and to be like here for the mission and to like go hard. And sometimes you like need to like be like, hey, you have to like show up to office 8 hours a week, I guess. But if you can like get away from that and be like, hey, this is your life now, that can be much more effective. And obviously there's nuance to that with everything. I think the thing that most people miss is like you want them to be like really bought in is they're humans. People care about more than money. They care about mission. So like both Carrie and Eric, they really cared about what we were doing. So it wasn't just about like the cash and dollars, but they're very bought into like with Sunflower, like trying to solve addiction. It's like, yeah, it's a really powerful mission. If like that is like one of the things you really care about. And for Carrie, it's like, she really cared about like functional medicine and like hormones. And it was a chance to like come and do really cool work and be able to like help a lot of people. So that piece is really powerful. The second layer is that all influencers like struggle to monetize their audience. No matter how big they are, even like at like the Kardashian level, I've never met an influencer that had just like an easy time monetizing their audience. It is always one of the hardest pieces of like being an influencer is like, how do you maximize just the monetization of this thing that you've built? Because most of them are missing a really good product. And that is where there can be really beautiful collaborations with tech companies where the benefit of like really good tech companies is like, you make a product that actually is really profitable and can like make a lot of money. So then when you like bring in an influencer, it's like, cool, you're no longer trying to like slack your like t-shirts or like branded supplements or something. It's like, oh, cool. Here's like a tech product that like really prints cash. And then that is cool. Now we have like a mission that we care about. We have a way to like really monetize your audience, give them equity. So they're like bought in on the company. And like when you do get acquired one day, like they walk away with like a lot of cash. The combination of that can be really, really powerful situation.
Makes total sense. So essentially incentivizing them with that employment contract like you do with shares. And it's just a much better way for them to make money. Okay. So you were a big part of getting the media empire of Rupa Health to be profitable was by bringing on people that had like the talent to create the information, but also were bringing some of their audience as well. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I would say the talent is the most important piece ultimately. You can pay for distribution, like go run some like meta ads. The talent piece is harder. Like if you have the cash anyways, you can bring in really smart people and if you can get them to create really good contents that like goes viral and is really engaging and is like powerful for your brand, it is actually, in my opinion, it is easier to then distribute that content than to find someone who's really good at creating it.
Was the university just written content?
No, so Ruby University, where it started was users were asking, like they loved the product, and the number one thing they wanted was they wanted to learn about the lab tests on our platform. So what we did was we started by bringing in really smart doctors to come and basically do like a weekly webinar to like talk about it. But webinar is so not sexy from like a brand point of view. So we started calling them live classes. So we'd bring in really smart doctors, and doctors are very similar to software engineers in the sense where they like really kind of like nerd out on like super technical stuff. So we would bring in smart doctors to come do like super clinically technical talks about just like whatever it is that like really like fascinates them. I can't tell you how many conferences I've been to where like someone will do this talk on like mold and then they'll just get like a standing ovation at the end. That kind of stuff was like honestly kind of Latin to me, but just like really hits the mark for them. Come do talk on like H. pylori. So anyways, we started running that every week for I want to say like almost a year before we moved into the boot camps. And what we realized was that these were really great for like getting engagements, but it was really hard to get someone to adopt a new test and like get the trust they needed to implement into their practice in like just a 60-minute call. So we started introducing what's called boot camps. You can think of this like Lambda school for doctors, where we would bring in a really smart doctor. Like one of our best was like Dr. Casey Means, co-founder of Levels, and have her come do like a 6-week boot camp on like metabolic testing.
And she wouldn't charge for that because she loves the game.
Oh, she definitely charged for the boot camp. So the boot camp were paid. It's $400 to join the boot camp. We had a revenue agreement with her as well. And then, yeah, for the doctors who came, there was a financial commitment. So it was like, cool, I've like paid money to commit to learning this. I'm learning about it from like an industry expert. And then instead of just like so we call it's like a 6-week program with like async content as well, where we like walk you through how to like implement this into your practice. And that was super effective, not just at like driving activations and users for Rupa and like getting them to actually use the test, but like that by itself was like very profitable business unit that reduced our blended CAC across all of our like GTM efforts.
Because you were able to sell that to people that you're running paid ads to like get the money back. But then also that meant you could scale the paid ads to get loads of attention for like the content that you would put before it.
Yeah. We actually just scraped all of the doctors' emails and then just started emailing them. It didn't even cost us anything to get in front of them. Like, that's going back to like, if you just have good content, the distribution is actually kind of easier. Because with the podcast and just with everything, like we were doing good content and sending it to them. Like they loved our brand and they trusted us. And we had basically taken our entire industry of doctors, put them on a newsletter and like got them hyped to receive our content. And then once we wanted to start selling them stuff, we just started selling them stuff. And it's like, hey, you love these live classes, you love this podcast, you want to come pay us $400 to like come to a boot camp to like learn about this test. So it is honestly all just lived off of a newsletter.
I totally agree. Like getting the content good enough and getting industry experts, like either hiring them like you guys did or working with them externally, I think is a key to doing that, because the marketer doesn't really know like what's really good for their ideal listeners unless they're like selling to marketers. So that for me is like a big insight. Let's quickly talk about the email thing, because obviously the doctors presumably were happy to get the emails because the content was so good. But did you get any pushback on just like cold emailing them?
Not really. Most people do outbound and just cold email like so awfully wrong. Like I'm like running like a consumer company right now, and I can't tell you how like a consumer app. And I can't tell you how many people spam me to death being like, hey, Kobe, do you wish you could get 200 more leads on your calendar every month? And I'm like, bro, I will take the call just to waste your time to have you like show up and pitch me on why my consumer app needs your like lead gen B2B service right now. And just get as far away from that as you possibly can. Like if you can send someone like a cold email that's like, hey, you care about this really specific niche thing and I brought in like the world's expert to like come talk to you about that. Yeah, hit me up with that all day long. Like give me Andrew Chen giving me like a private masterclass on like the cold start problem. Yeah, send me that email. But like no one ever sends me that email. So if you just if you just email people things that they care about, you're not spamming them. That is like the secret is like, don't like just like immediately start signing them, like give them like valuable content up front. And that is why podcasts can be super, super powerful.
So, okay, presumably then you're also using like the podcast as a hook. Let's say you got a banging guest. You would use that as a hook in the first cold email.
Yeah. So it was part of our cycle. We would do it. So we would send out 2 to 3 times a week, like a newsletter. Sometimes it'd be a podcast. Sometimes it would be like a live class. We'd kind of mix up a little bit. But yeah, podcast was definitely part of our rotation of just like, how do we deliver really great content to our audience to just get them to fall in love with us?
What stage in the podcast life did you start inserting advertisements?
I think it was after the Series A. I think it was, I don't remember when, but there was a moment where we were switching from paid to organic, and I wanted to bring down our blended CAC. One of the beautiful things about what we did at Rupa, it wasn't just taking us from 5 million to like 75 million a year in lab sales, or like increasing our user acquisition by like 4,000%. We cut our CAC by almost 2/3. So most companies get more and more expensive at scale, where each additional user costs you like more and more money to acquire. We went the complete opposite direction. And because of that, the reason that happened was it was our investment in organic assets like our podcast and magazine. And it was our investment in having assets that people would spend money on. So like ads for the podcast and the magazine and Rupa University. And I think that came in like after the A's, like we were like heading towards the B or acquisition, or we knew the direction we were going in. Our unit economics were going to become more and more and more important. And the only way for us to like get to actual scale was to drive all of the blended CAC down.
Makes total sense. And I bet the bankers or the founders, when going into like the acquisition talks, showing their blended CAC coming down 2/3 over the lifetime of the company, were like, that was a great thing. Okay, so let's transition then, because the company was acquired, you then left, and now have moved to the dark side. So first, please explain what Sunflower is. And then I want to see if any of the things that we've discussed are being used. We actually have already discussed one, the influencer, Eric. But Sunflower first, and let's talk about the marketing of it.
So we'll start from the top down. We're Sunflower. So Sunflower, you can think of us as a toolkit to help you stay sober. Doesn't matter what you're trying to quit, whether it's alcohol or heroin or meth or sex or gambling. Sunflower, we have like a little AI sponsor inside of it called Sam, and we will convince you to stop doing drugs and to stop committing chemically assisted suicide. We've grown from 0 to over 100,000 monthly active users in about 6 months. We're an A16Z speedrun startup. I believe we just raised about 1.6 million in our pre-seed. And yeah, just getting started. Right now, we are a consumer company, but hold on to your horses here, Tom, because we might turn into B2B really fast. We also exist in a 3-sided marketplace. We have the user, who is like the person that's trying to get sober. We also have therapists and psychiatrists. And we also have the insurance companies. So we actually live in this like very like blended market where like who actually pays for addiction? It is the hospital and the insurance company. So even though we like enter this through the consumer, it's kind of like calm, in my opinion, where you need to build the consumer brand. But then once you're like, hey, we're the largest app in the planet for how you get over addiction, then you can take that into hospital systems, into insurance companies, and like sell really large like 6-figure contracts.
No, so and where do the therapists come in? Because presumably they've been automated.
So I'm definitely in the camp of a therapist with AI is going to be more effective than a therapist alone or the AI alone. The problem is that it's a supply constrained market. We live in a world where there's not enough good therapists to like properly meet the demand of people that struggle with addiction. There's like 1 billion people on this planet that struggle with it. Go down to like Venezuela, and you know how many people specialize in like treating addiction in like Venezuela? It's like basically zero. We are steamrolling through continents in places in the world where we are the best option of care. I believe it's a combination. It's like the human is really important. If you can get the human, for large chunks of the world, it's just not an option.
Makes sense. Let's talk about growth. And first about the influencer. Is Eric the only influencer that you brought on?
Yes, Eric is the only influencer we brought on.
And did you proactively be like, I want to recreate the Rupa golden strategy and proactively go and find like a big influencer in the sober world?
There's definitely lots of things that I'm borrowing from what we did at Rupa, but I'm definitely also taking like a first principles approach to just like, how does this really specifically apply for Sunflower? There's lots of values of having important, influential people on your team, no matter what your product is. So yeah, we definitely like who is the biggest influencer in the space and like how can I like get them to like come work with us? And that was Eric.
And so you just cold DM him on Instagram?
I did. I sent him an email.
And then you just got chatting and now he's a full-time team member.
Yep. It's not too complicated. Hit them up, get them bought in on what you're doing. Eric's a really, really freaking cool guy. Obviously, he's like very close to the space, makes incredible content. And yeah, I'm incredibly lucky that he's working with us.
What's working best for user acquisition at the moment, if you're happy to share?
Combo of Eric plus meta ads, and then just having a good product that people fall in love with and then share with all their friends.
That's the key. Retention and referrals are the foundation of growth.
Absolutely.
Again, like I come back to the influencer thing because like your meta ads are just going to be so much more powerful if you have content from somebody who's an expert creator, and also maybe people even know when they see the ads that, oh, that's Eric because they follow him on Instagram. This is very powerful.
So with meta ads, we are combining using Air for content and ads. And then we also brought in an in-house illustrator and then run a bunch of variances, find what works, and let the ads print. They're actually getting, I don't want to say easy, but it's becoming simple, like press a button and go with the ads. And it becomes so much more important about just how good the product is. The more money we make off of the product, the more aggressive we can be with the ads. And it's like, cool, if we drive in 100 users through paid, how many of those users then refer out to like a friend organically? That piece becomes super, super important.
Yeah, I feel like so many marketers just like obsess so much on like this switch in meta ads when actually they just need to like take a step back. And if it's their own business, work on the product. If it's not their own business, then they need to go and speak to the product people and the CEO founders to try and make the product better. So that is a big belief I have. Okay. Wow. There we go. So what did we cover? We covered some, I think, very critical mind shifts that I think B2B entrepreneurs / marketers need to make. And one is around influencers, bringing them onto the team. Another one is around building content that's good enough to get attention and ideally also to sell sponsorships and monetize. And I think that is like the key takeaway for me, because the way you do that is like bringing the influencers on. So this is something that I think we need to explore. And I think something that you've done really well and that other people need to do. So Kobe, we're going to link to your X profile. We'll link to Eric. We'll also link to Sunflower. Anything else we should link to or mention?
If you're struggling with addiction or you know a friend or family that is, you can check us out on the App Store and the Play Store. You'd be really surprised at just how effective Sunflower works.
Nice, Kobe. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Tom.
All right, team. What do we think? That's it. Bringing on influencers, creating epic content, monetizing it with sponsorships, courses, etc., in order to bring that customer acquisition cost down. If you're bringing the customer acquisition cost down and you have a great product that's retaining and referring, then you have a growth machine. So thank you to Kobe for coming on. Thank you to Fame for producing the show, and thanks to you for listening.